Good afternoon and welcome to the August 24th, 2023 School Board Meeting Work Session of your Henrico County School Board. The first item on our agenda this afternoon is the approval of the agenda. Board members, may I have a motion, please?
I move that the school board approve the agenda for today's meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Adkins. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Reverend Cooper. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. The agenda has been approved. The next item on our agenda this afternoon is closed session. May I have a motion, please, to go into closed session?
I move that the school board go into closed session for the discussion of matters covered under items A1 and A6 of section 2.2-371, A8 of section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia, 1950, as amended pertaining to the assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, and or resignation of specific school board employees, and consultation with legal counsel regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice related to the compliance with Virginia Code section 22.2 through 23.3 and dash 23.3 and related laws, including but not limited to 42 USC section 2000E, 20 USC section 1681 and 20 USC section 1232G.
Say that twice, Mrs. Shea.
Thank you so
Very well
much for
done.
that motion, Mrs. Shea.
And
Can
I will
someone
second that.
Thank you so
And
much,
I don't
Ms.
have to say
Ogburn.
anything else.
All right, let's take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. We will now go into closed session. We will reconvene this afternoon's work session at the conclusion of our closed meeting. Good afternoon and welcome back to the August 24th, 2023 work session of your Henrico School Board. The next item on our agenda this afternoon is the certification of closed session. May I have a motion, please, to certify closed session?
I move that the school board certify by a recorded vote that to the best of each school board member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion authorizing the closed session were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Ogburn. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Atkins. Let's take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Closed session has been certified. Dr. Cashwell, items from the superintendent.
Thank you, Chair Kinsella, members of the board, good afternoon. For the first item I have for your review, and then for our monthly meeting this evening, it's on the agenda for approval, an updated Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, with the Henrico Education Foundation, also known as HEF. This MOU updates a number of new ways we continue to partner together, and as you know, HEF is a tremendous supporter. In fact, this evening, there are a number of innovative grants coming forward. So anyway, we'll happily take any questions you might have related to the updated MOU.
Board members, I'm going to start to my right with Reverend Cooper. Do you have any questions about the revised MOU?
No, ma'am, I don't.
Thank you so much. Any questions or comments, Ms. Atkins?
No.
Mrs. Ogburn?
I have one. Do we happen to know, Dr. Cashwell, if because in here it requires an annual report from the staff and programs? And do we happen to know if those annual reports are shared with the board or if they're included with the annual report that is published each year by HEF?
I believe it's the published report, but I'll find out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ogburn. Mrs. Shea? No. Okay, that's on to the next item, Dr. Cashwell.
Thank you. The next two items are policy related, and I'm seeking both review and action at our monthly meeting with the waiving of the 30-day period. The first one is policy P4-05-016, and that's employee conduct. If you have any questions there, again, I'm asking a waiver of the 30-day review period to go ahead and approve that at the monthly meeting.
Board members, I'm going to start to my left. Mrs. Shea, any questions or comments? Mrs. Ogburn, questions or comments?
No.
Mrs. Atkins?
No.
Reverend Cooper? And I don't have any either, as this has come before Policy Committee. Next item, Dr. Cashwell.
For the next item, I am also, again, recommending waiving the 30-day review period so this can come into effect and benefit our employees. And this is a proposed policy P4-08-020, paid parental leave, which establishes a new policy to offer up to 8 weeks of paid parental leave to full-time and permanent part-time Henrico County Public Schools employees for the care and well-being of a newborn or newly adopted child for foster care placement. This policy will go into effect for September 1, and of course, corresponding regulation is attached for reference as well. Would I welcome any questions related to this new proposed policy?
If I may just start by saying how excited I am as a member of the Policy Committee when this came before us, that is so responsive to the needs of our employees and another way that we're setting ourselves apart here in Henrico. So kicking it off with that, I'm going to start with my colleague who also sits on the Policy Committee, Mrs. Ogburn.
Thank you. I'm kind of wishing I had some balloons or, party favors or something, because I think this is such a huge win for our staff members. I feel like we can hear a collective cheer out in the schools, because our teachers, they need this. And this is going to be a game changer for families to be able to access their FMLA and have 8 weeks of it paid. And to know that they're eligible for FMLA, but they're also eligible for this benefit as well. To me, this is, it's been long time coming, and I think it's really exciting news for our staff. My only comment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Ogburn. Mrs. Shea.
Thank you so much. I echo both Ms. Kinsella and Ms. Ogburn's sentiments that this is tremendously exciting. This is huge. This is a game changer. This is Henrico kind of leading the way we do. Dr. Cashwell or Ms. Bolden, could you kind of give us some context of what this could look like for an employee? I know many of us are familiar with the old system of banking days, and I had my child under the banking the days and using it for FMLA. And so how might this look different going forward?
This could look different in a number of different ways depending upon the employee's circumstance. So I'll just start with a very basic example, and I can provide additional examples if you like. So a basic example would be an employee going out on FMLA for the birth of a child. FMLA grants 13 weeks. 8 weeks of that 13 would be paid by the employer. And the remaining 8 plus 5 is 13, right? And the remaining 5 could be covered under the employee's own personal leave balances. So that's just one way, but there are several.
Wonderful. That's really exciting to hear. Thank you so much. That's all.
Thank you, Mrs. Shea. Mrs. Atkins.
I concur with everything and look forward to voting on it. The sooner the better.
Thank you, Mrs. Atkins, for your enthusiasm. Reverend Cooper.
Yes, ma'am. No, I'm just in concurrence with all of you all. Thank you.
And Ms. Bolden, if I could have you back just to clarify a few other things. So this would be for those eligible. It is for any employee to take, correct?
For those eligible, yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then can you just talk about, maybe touch on the limits of such? And again, we don't want to go too deep into HR because I know it's going to be a request subject to certain documentation and circumstances, but how many times could you take, like you could take it how many times in a year, right?
Once in a year, but it is 8 weeks.
Okay.
And so a person may not exhaust the total 8 weeks in one occurrence, so they do have the entire year to take the total of 8 weeks.
Okay, total of 8 weeks in one rolling calendar year?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you so much for that clarity, and then I'll leave the rest to you and HR because we try to not get in your lane. But thank you so much.
Thank you as
This-
well.
This is very exciting, Dr. Cashwell. Thank you and your team for working with us and hearing us, and most importantly, hearing our employees. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm glad to hear board support for this important new policy. The next proposed revision to policy, for which we're not seeking your approval at this meeting, but at the September 28th meeting, is related to revisions for policy P6-05-013, technology and internet safety. And this policy change has been made to update and identify safety measures to ensure proper and responsible use of Henrico County Public Schools technology by students.
Thank you, Dr. Cashwell. I'm going to start with you this time, Mrs. Atkins.
I do have a question, just clarification or definition. On the second page, let me get the paragraph. Second page, third paragraph, if you could define so-called hacking for me and help me understand what that terminology means. I understand hacking, but the phrase says so-called hacking. How do we determine hacking from so-called hacking?
Certainly can get more clarity before the September 28th meeting, but I would imagine that it may be that it's an informal term, hacking, and so therefore the precursor was put there. But certainly a good question, and we can find out the specifics.
And I would infer that it would refer to kind of outside entities getting past traditional firewalls and/or security measures of a variety of kinds.
I would recommend defining that versus using so-called.
Yep.
Because then that's left up to more interpretation. So something to just consider.
Thank you.
And that's all.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Atkins. Mrs. Ogburn? Mrs. Shea? Reverend Cooper? And I don't have anything to add. Next item, Dr. Cashwell.
The next item is a recommendation for a review of proposed policy revisions to policy P11-01. And this is proposed revisions to update the way the school division communicates information as part of a strong school-community relationship. And it's part of a comprehensive review of all of the communications-related policies and regulations.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cashwell. Reverend Cooper, do you have any comments or questions? Mrs. Atkins?
No.
Mrs. Ogburn? Mrs. Shea? And I don't have any, as these things have already come before Policy Committee. Next item, please.
Thank you. Next is a recommendation to consider the retirement of policy P11-02, general information, as all language is included in other policies and regulations.
Board members, since this is a retirement where items are covered elsewhere, any questions or comments? Next item, Dr.
Okay, the
Cashwell.
next item is a review for proposed revisions to policy P11-02-001, external communications, and this has been updated to share the process and plan for communicating information externally. Edits have also been made to the corresponding regulation.
Mrs. Shea, any questions or comments? Mrs. Ogburn? Mrs. Atkins? Reverend Cooper? Next item,
All
Dr.
right,
Cashwell.
similarly, you'll see proposed revisions to policy P11-02-002, internal communications. And again, this clarifies how the communications division and school principals will communicate with employees. And this recommendation for revisions is again part of that comprehensive review of communications-related policies and regulations.
Board members, any questions or comments?
No.
Next item.
All right, the next one is a review of proposed revisions to policy P11-02-003, digital communication liaisons. And this reflects the current roles and responsibilities of the digital communication liaisons.
Board members, any questions or comments on this item? Next item.
Okay, also in the same vein, proposed revisions to policy P11-02-004, media relations. And again, it's updated to ensure that consistent and timely responses are communicated to the media and that guidelines for sharing personnel and student information are followed.
Board members, any questions or comments on this, on these revisions?
No.
Dr. Cashwell, next item.
Okay, continuing the theme and communications-related policies are proposed revisions to policy P11-03-007, recognition of patron groups. And these revisions clarify the use of the Henrico County Public Schools name or logo by outside organizations or groups.
Board members, any questions or comments on this item? Next policy item.
Is revision to policy P11-12, public announcements. The proposed revisions just clarify the language and identify the superintendent's designee.
Board members, any questions or comments on this minor edit to this policy? Next item, Dr. Cashwell.
All right, proposed revisions to policy P11-13-001, distribution of literature distribution to students, and again clarifies the procedure for distributing materials or literature to students. And there are also edits made to the corresponding regulation.
I'm going to start with Mrs. Shea. Mrs. Shea, questions or comments?
Thank you. And this pertains both to this policy, I think, and also the next one, P11-13-002. Perhaps it may be useful to also specify that staff in schools should not be expected to make copies of flyers to be distributed.
Got it. Thank you for that. We'll take that.
That way we're not using our copy resources for outside groups.
Thank you for that feedback, Mrs. Shea. Mrs. Ogburn? No, I'm good. Ms. Atkins? Reverend Cooper? Next item, Dr. Cashwell.
And as foreshadowed by Mrs. Shea, I have some proposed revisions to policy P11-13-002, literature distribution to staff.
Any questions, board members, or comments on this item?
I did have one, and it's more a question. The first sentence, the school board expects that the school division's communication with employees will focus primarily on academic initiatives and resources to support student success, compensation and benefits, professional learning, and other topics directly aligned with the work of Henrico County Public Schools. Does that include wellness, health and wellness?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Just consider maybe adding it. If you feel this is adequate, leave it, but I think a clarification around health and wellness will be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Atkins, for your feedback. Reverend Cooper, did I ask you if you had any feedback? I lost track. Thank you so much. Madam Superintendent, next item.
Thank you. And again, feedback noted on that one. Next, a review of proposed revisions to policy P11-15-001, directories and yearbooks, student directories, and these are minor clarifying edits to the policy.
Board members, any questions or comments for Dr. Cashwell? Next item, please.
All right, review of proposed revisions to policy P11-15-002, staff directories. Again, edits have been made as part of the comprehensive review of all related policies and regulations.
Board members, any questions for Dr. Cashwell or Mrs. Coy? Next item, please.
And the final one for this evening is a consideration to retire policy P11-15-003 yearbooks, as the language is included in other policies and regulations.
Board members, any questions or comments on this item? I do appreciate, I know Ms. Ogburn and I sit on the policy committee, we do appreciate your dedication and commitment to reviewing policies and combining them to make them more efficient and more transparent where possible.
Thank you, and we're grateful for the support of the policy committee, including our two board member representatives. As you can see on the agendas, it's been ongoing, steady work. The next item, so pleased to provide a school opening update. I think everyone remembers we're in our first week of school, so want to provide an update. It seems like we were just together talking about readiness for school, and now are pleased to report on the first day. I'll turn it over to Mrs. Coy.
Wonderful. Thank you. Good afternoon, Board. This is a relatively brief presentation that I'll run through that builds on the back-to-school presentation we provided at the August 10th work session, and the whole team will be happy to answer questions as they arise. We're thrilled to report that the year has started off smoothly as we navigate some of the typical transitions and adjustments related to all things HVAC and transportation, but also as we manage new challenges related to our weapon scanners and other adjustments. In particular, I want to note that the hard work that went into preparing and addressing HVAC concerns over the last week. We have 7.6 million square feet, 54,000 classrooms, and 500 different mechanical systems. And in the hot August weather, there's a lot of strain on those systems, as I know you are all well aware from the schools in your districts. Their needs change by the day, but teams worked through last weekend around the clock to make sure that those classrooms, those spaces were ready for our students and staff, and to deploy backup plans when they couldn't be ready in time. And so really appreciate all of the work that went in there. The dedicated HCPS staff, our bus drivers, our teachers and our principals, our security officers, SROs, our school nutrition team members have worked around the clock to ensure every one of our schools and classrooms was up and running on the first day for our students. And we're incredibly grateful to all of them for the effort that they have put in. Thank you, appreciate it. As you all know, this year schools are rallying around the themes of hope, belonging, and learning. And I'm pleased to share these photos with you where you can see these themes really shining through on our first few days as we welcome back our students and staff and welcome many new students to HCPS for the first time. We have seen and heard the stories of many smiling faces arriving this week and the warm and welcoming classrooms that our teachers have thoughtfully prepared for them. Okay, thanks. As we segue from those smiling faces to our operational reports, I want to provide you with an exciting staffing update. At our last meeting, we reported that we had 122 vacancies out of just over 4,100 teaching positions for a 97% teaching staffing rate. This week, we are thrilled to report that we're down to 70 teacher openings, and that percentage has increased up to 98%. Of course, all of those remaining classrooms are covered while we continue recruiting for those full-time permanent positions. As you well know, this week, all of our HCPS high schools welcome students back with the new weapon scanners at the entry points. As was expected with such an adjustment, the safety protocols did slow down arrivals on some campuses, but each school sought to ensure that all the students and staff had time to adjust, become familiar and comfortable with the new process, and ask questions about those new routines. Some of our schools experienced those delays the first few days, but students did make their way to classrooms without penalty for being tardy, as everyone adjusted. Our dedicated safety team was on site each day, helping buildings modify procedures and entry points to improve efficiency, given the unique nature of each building and the arrival flow of students. Throughout the week, we have seen those delays decrease dramatically or be eliminated altogether. I'll just note that we also continue our active recruitment and hiring of our school security officers as we prepare for the eventual deployment of scanners at our middle and elementary schools. Our school transportation team has done a phenomenal job of getting more than 1,500 bus routes up and running. As we continue our recruitment efforts there, we are looking to fill remaining positions. As of this week, we need 22 additional drivers in order to eliminate the need for any double runs. Families who were impacted by these vacancies were notified ahead of time, and other drivers are covering those routes, obviously, while we try to fill those remaining positions. While we're still in the early days, we do anticipate ridership will level out over the coming weeks, and we'll be able to share kind of more consistent information and data with you all about the transportation landscape in the coming weeks. And then finally, I'll just note the screen cap there from Edulog, which is the parent portal for parents to track buses. This is our second year using that bus app, and still encouraging parents to download it so that they can track any potential delays. But of course, we're also using Parent Square messaging to keep parents informed about any transportation issues that arise. Finally, our school nurses and our school health staff have been working incredibly hard to ensure as many students as possible arrived on the first day with the immunizations and the health physicals that they needed to stay in class that first day. So this summer, those teams were in communication with parents, particularly for our preschool, kindergarten, 7th grade, and 12th grade students. And as part of those efforts, our school nurses were calling parents and guardians individually, making sure they were able to connect those families to immunization clinics or pediatricians for physicals so that they could arrive day one ready to learn. In addition to that layer of support, we did again partner with the Richmond and Henrico Health District to offer 6 free walk-in on-site vaccination clinics during these first 2 weeks of school. I've only posted the remaining times and dates up there. We've had success over the first few days. These are open to all of our 7th and 12th grade students. And I am thrilled to report that this week, those clinics provided 433 vaccinations. Last Friday, we had 1,374 students who still needed immunizations. And by the end of yesterday, that was down to 388. So these teams have been working around the clock, making those clinics as accessible as possible. You can see a few of their smiling faces here, but we really appreciate their commitment to making sure our students are able to jump into their classes day one ready to learn, and that those remaining immunizations are not a barrier. So again, that concludes our brief update, but the team and I are happy to answer any questions that you all might have.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Coyne. If I might, on behalf of the board, just express gratitude. Gratitude to our students, our families, our employees, everyone for, I swear, giving us the best back to school I can remember in recent times. So kicking it off with that enthusiasm of gratitude. I'm gonna start to my right with Reverend Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I want to just kind of echo that. I had the opportunity to visit 5 schools on opening day, and the staff, the parents and guardians and students seemed very excited and ready to begin a great year. And I want to express my appreciation to everyone for all hands being on deck. So I'm gonna just go through what you went through. So staffing, I know this is a moving target, but of the 70 unfilled teacher openings, these openings scattered throughout the county, or are there concentration in certain schools or areas?
Good afternoon again. There is a bit of scattering, and then there is a bit of concentration in select areas, and principals and HR and others are still working very diligently to fill those vacancies.
So I want to point out that all 3 of the high schools with the highest number of remaining vacancies after accounting for board subs are all in the East End. Henrico has 6 vacancies, Highland Springs 4, Verona 7. And we have the non-opportunity schools, and of course, Henrico's not listed as one, but what can we do to help ensure these positions are filled? And can I get an update on what classes there are?
Certainly, we can provide an update on the classes. I think we really have a lot of different and varied strategies in place, and if we continue to toe the line and continue down the path that we laid, I'm confident that we will be able to reduce those numbers.
I appreciate that, because when I looked at Laburnum's numbers, and it's an opportunity school, we still have 7 vacancies at Laburnum as of August the 18th. Now, that might have changed. Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Bowler.
Very welcome.
So Ms. Coy, the weapon scanners, I know many of our students, families, and staff have expressed some frustration with the long lines, wait times and delays, but with any new protocol, it takes time to iron out any kinks, and we're just requesting grace and patience with the process. Since this is a new process in our high schools, have our building leaders had a chance to share best practices with each other and ways to manage the lines, prepare students for entry, et cetera?
Yes, I think it's fair to say we are all learning together and they're learning from one another in this process. We learned during the field testing in the spring that these refinements happened as we lived into the practices. And so not surprised by that, and that they're learning from one another as we continue improving. And I think that will also be a key part as we take this to our middle and our high schools for those principals and other security staff involved in the procedures to share what they've learned along the way.
And I would add to that, and particularly want to thank some folks sitting here, Dr. Farrell sitting here, Lenny Pritchard, John Casulo, other members of the safety team, Dr. Grant. We were all out inspecting schools and their procedures and trying to help not only with the process, but give recommendations and share best practices across schools. And, you know, there were delays on Monday and Tuesday in some school, but by Wednesday, it was really marked improvements across the system. And, you know, I got to witness that firsthand. And so with practice and, you know, comfort level, things sped up. And in some cases, it was just refining a few elements of the procedure. So continue to work towards that. But, you know, real pleased to be on day 3 and 4, seeing the kind of progress we saw. Really testament to our leaders who've spent the extra time, our building leaders, and our students and staff who are embracing something new.
Well, I went to Henrico High to walk through the scanner myself, so I was a person. So, Ms. Coy, so I've asked this question, I'm asking it again, I don't know, Dr. Castro, but will we in the future consider opportunities for trained volunteers to assist? Maybe it's greeters to help them with logistics, anything like that?
Oh, there are a number of ways volunteers can help with greeting in the morning, those kinds of things, and each school has a process for that. And so if anyone was interested in volunteering, we could certainly assist them in connecting to a school, or they could reach out to their neighborhood school directly. But when it comes to actually running the weapon scanners and participating in the screening process, those would be trained staff.
Thank you so much for that. Mrs. Coy, I just want to say transportation, the EduLog app has been working great for me. We get our alert when my son's bus arrives and when he gets dropped off. So I just want to see Mr. Pritchard shaking his head as well. So health and wellness, I want to thank the nurses and our health and wellness team for the immunization clinics. I was at Wilder Middle School, and there was a line out the door of parents and guardians with their kids getting that, and it worked well. The feedback I've received is expressing appreciation for the clinics that have been held, because they've made it convenient and accessible for many of our families, and they also appreciate the extensive efforts that you've made in communicating the times, locations of these clinics. It's been helpful in removing another barrier for some of our families. So I just wanted to just say thank you. Just a general question. We've been hearing that community transmission related to COVID-19, where COVID has increased, and as we prepare for flu season, I wanted to ask about our cleaning supplies and our teachers' access to PPE if needed. Do we still have any of those supplies available?
Yes, we continue to make those available, and we monitor, again, with our partners in VDH, any local transmission, whether it be the flu or any other communicable disease, and we do keep track of that at the building and division level and make sure that our protocols are in place, and if there are any additional supplies needed, that we provide them.
Well, I appreciate that, because along with our grade-wide back-to-school supply list, I received feedback regarding the concern that there's no cleaning budget. And that parents are forced to provide cleaning supplies such as disinfectant spray, disinfectant wipes, tissues, et cetera, for our schools. Otherwise, our teachers would be burdened with footing the cost. Could you speak to what the schools provide as it relates to cleaning supplies to ensure our classrooms are properly cleaned and maintained?
Yes, our schools are stocked with supplies for the staff who clean the building, and there are approved supplies that are provided through our custodial maintenance services. Paper towels are stocked in the bathrooms and classrooms where there are sinks and paper towel dispensers, and all of our daily cleaning protocols are followed. And then for any spills or messes throughout the day, there are protocols in place and cleaning available. I think what you might be speaking to, some teachers like to have community supplies donated to the classroom and make those as requests on their supply list, but shouldn't be requirements for students to have to start the year. But given your question, this is something we can certainly talk with our school-based leaders about and reiterate expectations related to classroom donations at school supply time.
No, I appreciate that, because I don't want anybody thinking that we do not supply our schools, our individual classrooms, whatever cleaning supplies they need. So thank you so much for that. Last thing, building facilities, thank you for the brief update in regards to the square footage and the HVAC issues that we're having. One question I do want to ask is, on days when we may experience record temperatures or when heat advisories have been issued and the school experiences cooling issues, can you give some examples of how a team would respond to this issue, like what the threshold would need to be met in order to cancel classes for the school, and how this would be communicated in order to address the issues promptly and comfortably for that learning environment?
Sure. I think it's fair to say we're monitoring those, especially on these hot days. We knew coming into the first day of school it was going to be particularly warm. Any of those requests that come in are addressed as quickly as they can by the facilities team and monitored. Should there be building-wide or kind of expansive outages within a building, we have certainly spot coolers that can be brought in to keep kids in the classroom, but if for some reason adjustments were needed beyond that, which they haven't been to date this year, we could consider that as needed.
No, I saw that firsthand. I was at Lakeside Elementary School on Monday, and our facilities teams were on site, specifically in the library, which was extremely hot, and they moved all the library activities out of that room and to make sure that the services, quote unquote, were not interrupted, and they were working feverishly. They brought in the spot cooler, it had some fans, and so I was very happy to see the way that they tried to mitigate that unforeseeable and unfortunate incident. So thank you to the team. Madam Chair, that's all for me.
Thank you so much, Reverend Cooper. I appreciate those questions, especially how you highlighted resources and the supplies within our buildings. I've also heard that, that it's not necessarily coming across like an optional donation. So thank you for that, Reverend Cooper. I'm going to go to my left with Mrs. Atkins.
Thank you for the presentation. It's been a wonderful start to the school year, and this year I chose to focus on where our families were. So I went to a variety of bus stops and sharing high fives and hugs, and seeing the doors on the bus open really was the smile from the bus driver to the family. And it was a wonderful experience to just meet children and families where they are in their communities at the bus. And I also want to give kudos to the students for their patience, their enthusiasm. They're walking into their buildings understanding adaptability with weapon scanners and adjusting as necessary, and it's a beautiful thing to see. I think it's a testament to the culture that we're moving to. So wanted to share that. I also want to acknowledge the support of our parents, families, churches, communities. I saw increased level of engagement, particularly in Varina, Sanston, and Highland Springs. I still see it. It's beautiful. I do have a few questions and comments. So in observing traffic patterns, I noticed, and again, I was just at the various bus stops, I noticed at several schools, particularly in the Varina district, but I would imagine that there are schools across Henrico that are experiencing the backup on the major roads. I'd like for the division to consider, in conversation with the principal, having dedicated turning lanes. I do think that that would be helpful, but in specific times, whether it's drop off or pick up. I'll use Varina High School as an example. For our drop-offs, they'll come into the main entrance, they go past the gym, past the stadium, and they can go left or right. Where there's already a line to get inside, if you had a dedicated right turn only between these designated hours, it would help with traffic flow. That's just one example that I'd like the division to take a look at. I think Fairfield Middle School has adopted a dedicated turning time, and I have seen a decrease there. So please take a look at the schools in my district particularly to see if that would be helpful.
And I want to thank you for that suggestion and note that that'll actually happen across all districts. And you're right, the traffic, particularly the first week of school, when we see the highest number of parent drop-offs or folks getting rides to school and not using transportation, sometimes that tapers off. But in many cases, we work with the administrator, our school safety team, and at times even do traffic studies because parts of the issue are often off of school property. It could be the timing of a light cycle outside that affects the traffic flow, turn lanes, those sorts of things. So appreciate your consideration there, and know that we are working with our buildings to find out where those hot spots are that haven't resolved themselves after the first few days of school.
Fantastic. Also, you spoke to our HVAC challenges. You don't have to share it at this time, however, maybe in the next 24 or 48 hours. I would like a more specific update on the challenges per school and where it is. In some cases, it may just be a wing. In other cases, it's the whole building. And in some cases, also, it's super isolated to a classroom. And so versus making a blanket statement, I think it makes a difference in understanding how big the issue is and how unique it is to the school.
Yep,
Also,
we can certainly get that for you, yes, and you're spot on. The challenges are different by the day, by the building.
I think to respond to constituents, particularly in my district, whether they're watching the news or whether they have a child in the building coming home sharing, it would be great to give them accurate information that it's not a school-wide in every situation. So I appreciate that. The next comment/question. So during this back-to-school time, I've noticed an increase in variance requests and registrations in my district. I wanted to know if there's any insight that you could provide as to why, particularly in Varina, Sanston, and Highland Springs.
I will note that our building administrators are across the county experience high levels of new registrations or students who have moved within the county. And while I know they attempt to encourage folks to come to the school and register or make arrangements to transfer records and those sorts of things before the first day, we do see an uptick, and particularly with younger students who maybe missed that kindergarten registration window. We have a lot of new little ones coming to school for the first time who are just registering with us. And we're a week ahead, actually 2 weeks ahead of the traditional, so I think we're feeling it even more this year, as it may have snuck up on some families who may be new to Henrico schools and they're not getting our updates, or they've moved within the system. But we do endeavor to try to get that communication far and wide. And then with variances, help folks know that there are some annual approval processes there, but some folks are getting to that as the school year is starting, or just as it was starting, rather than as it expired at the end of the last school year. So we'll continue to work to better communicate those procedures so that we're not in this position next year.
Thank you for that. I've just been trying to noodle over how to resolve or how to share the feedback. A few examples include particularly seniors that attend HVA that want, juniors last year, rising seniors that were at HVA, but they want their child to have a in-person senior experience. I've received more phone calls about that and the delay in students who attended HVA as a junior wanting to go in person as a senior and being delayed with enrollment. So if you could just research that, that would be helpful.
Sure.
The other example that I'll provide to you is around maybe students that were approved prior to our policy changes on variances for a particular school. I do not believe, and colleagues, please keep me honest, that we had a grandfathering of students that were approved prior to our changes on variances. And so those students that may have been given the green light are now maybe not eligible now because we've made changes through variances. So if you could just do some research on that, I'm not stating that that's accurate or inaccurate. I'm really asking for research around that whole increase in the request that I'm seeing, whether it's from HBA or the changing in our variance policies where they may have been approved prior to our changes.
Happy to look into that for you. Our variances are approved on an annual basis, and they do have to be submitted, and they are approved only for 1 year. So families do have to be in the habit of requesting that. Speaking to recent policy changes from the board, that was really around residents who move out of county. So not as much variances, but the time in which a family has to remain enrolled once they make that move out of county. So related, but slightly different. So yes, happy to look into that and look at our numbers from previous years and see how they compare. I know this is the time of year when those requests are coming, and we're fielding them as fast as we can.
Yes, I appreciate that. Regarding health and wellness, you shared the number already, but do you mind repeating the number or percentage of students that do not have immunizations and therefore they're not enrolled?
As of the close of business yesterday, 388 students was the remaining pool. And I'm going to look at Leslie because I think that was immunizations and physicals combined.
And the number starting the week was?
Over 1,300.
So it went from 1,300 to about 300 in a few days based on those in-house clinics and our partnership with VDH, which is tremendous. And I do want, I'm glad Dr. Hughes came up because huge kudos to her and her team for fostering this partnership to allow on-site vaccinations, because, you know, this is something we've all identified as a challenge for families, and we want our kids in school learning and ready to learn. And so this is a creative way to make sure we're bridging that gap for families, and you can see the difference it's making.
Yes, yeah, so applause and well done. And what can I do or we do to help families get their children immunizations and physicals other than the clinics? What other opportunities are available? Communications or what else?
I think, our media and communications department does a wonderful job through the binder, through various on our website. I think it's just continuing to help us get the word out. It really is interesting. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, families are still not aware. And some of that's because of the new requirements with some of our immunizations that are recent. But
State
I think,
requirements.
Yes,
We
right.
haven't changed
No,
it.
not
I just
any
want
for
to be clear
Henrico schools. State requirements. And some of those changes happened during COVID, so families truly weren't aware. But I think the more you can help us get the word out, and we're just going to continue to partner with the Richmond Henrico Health Department. They have been a huge asset for us and really have done everything we've asked. And I think we can see that when we are able to provide those clinics right in the schools, it does benefit our families.
And I would add that, while certainly the more global advertising of these opportunities, particularly early in the summer, were effective, at this point it's identifying the specific families where the need is. So we know the 300 students where this is an issue. School nurses are working directly with the families, school administration making that connection. So it's a little more personal at this point. And so we certainly can plug them into our on-site opportunities and make them aware of other opportunities in the community as well.
Thank you. I do have a few more, so thank you for giving me this time. Can you share the usage data for the EduLog, the transportation app? I'm interested in the utilization of it.
Yep, we could certainly
We
get
can
that for you.
provide that.
Okay. And last, I just have a kudos for the communication team. I think that the communication team is just doing an awesome job. The website is crisp, it is clear. I am a fan of white space, and I see it in our website. I'm also a fan of the Parent Square app, and it is shaping to be a more effective way to receive and deliver accurate information, and I'm very pleased with shifting away from just delivering a message to being a messenger to cultivate relationships. And so I really see us moving in that way from the communications team. I do have an ask, so not to take away from the kudos, but I would like to see a little bit more communication around crossing the street. Stop, look, and listen. I am noticing, and again, partly because I am truly focused on going to families and students where they are at bus stops, and I notice some of our kids really don't stop, look, and listen. I'm talking elementary, middle, and high. And so if there are ways that we can communicate with parents and students on really paying attention and following the rules of the road, I think we may find helpful, we may be helpful in that space for parents as well. And that's all I have, Chair Kinsella.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Atkins. Mrs. Ogburn.
Thank you. Mine questions really revolve around the scanners, so I'm not sure if, sorry.
We're all well-versed, so go for it.
Yeah, I know.
think we can, this has been an all hands on
I know
deck.
you are. So it's either Mr.
Yeah.
Kasula or Mr. Pritchard, but, and we've already talked, so I think it's behooves us to talk about it, but the lines at the scanners at Deep Run, and you and I have talked about this, and I know they're better, and I've gotten reports each day from parents and from Dr. Fellows that initially there were some problems, but those seem to have been worked out. So just a word of appreciation for, I know that there were some folks that went out there and looked at it, how can we make it better, and the kids are in the building, and as of what I was told yesterday, they were in class by 9 o'clock. So that's an improvement. But what I am getting feedback on is what has to come out of a backpack and go before the kids can go through the scanners, and concerns of parents that they are going to have to, once they have computers and they have all the other, as things go on, that those backpacks are going to have more stuff in them. So I'm just curious if you can give some information on what's got to come out of the backpack, and are we set and ready for that when the computers are distributed?
Yes, and the good thing is that we're making these improvements as laptops are being passed out. So we've made it even more challenging each day that we've moved through this process, and our times are getting better. So it was truly the first day of all new stuff. Things that need to come out are obviously laptops. These are weapon scanners, they're not metal scanners, and so density of metals and objects, so the spine, the back spine of a laptop is something that's going to trigger it to go off. Oddly enough, glass cases as well, because the metal spine that runs through this is about the length of a knife blade that would register as a weapon and concern. So things like that do set it off.
And I will note, it's not all.
No, it's not.
We, one of the things that during the field test, I was able to witness that Lenny and his team and administrators worked with students begin to know objects they carry every day. Like, for example, a particular student's umbrella that had a heavy concentration of metal. Quickly after the first time going through the scanner, learned that's something to pass around. And so whether it's a laptop, a heavy metal water bottle, glasses case, it becomes quickly evident the kinds of things you're traditionally carrying that would set it off. And then there's a procedure for those to be taken outside the scanner and inspected by the security personnel.
Okay, so as we get into the fuller backpack, and as school gets going, with more kids bringing more stuff, is this going to create the lines again, or do we have that scenario covered with, additional people to scan and look at the things that are being passed around? Because that's the biggest concern I'm hearing right now.
So the field tests were when school was in swing and backpacks were full, and we tested it across high schools, middle schools, and elementary schools. And so I don't think it was what they were carrying, it was getting used to the routine. So in all cases, both what we saw across our high schools Monday to today and at our field test schools, it's just really getting used to the process and the types of materials that will cause it to alarm. And so, the students at the field test schools were removing their laptops without thought. You know, what became a routine, and in some cases were tall enough to hold it above the scanner, and other times it passed around. And I mean, I watched this in action with little people to our high schoolers, and it becomes very, very routine. It's just a matter of understanding those expectations. And so I know as a parent of a high schooler, you know, some of the reminders that came home with my student were related to the water bottles and the laptops. And once students begin to understand that, it moves much faster. So that itself shouldn't cause the delay. I think it's any new routine. And I think our administrators are putting those reminders out to students now, even if they haven't had their laptop distributed.
Okay. All righty, thank you. But I assume patience
Yes.
is always a virtue. And as our students and the parents get used to this routine, you know, I know they don't like it, they don't like to hear it will get better, but it will. And I think that just, you know, like you said, as they get into the habit of doing this. But I'm assuming we are continuing to evaluate and update and as we need to. Am I right?
We go out each
Absolutely.
morning and visit one of our schools. We're kind of like a liaison for certain schools, and I have schools that I go to every single morning to make sure that it happens all the way up to the ACE centers as well. We go visit those, so we're making sure that we're on site, working with administration to help improve what they're doing every day.
Well, and I appreciate that support because I know we can't just put this on the shoulders of our administrators, and I know we are trying our best not to do that. And so a little grace to them and patience, I know would be appreciated because it is tough. Change is hard, and this has been a huge change, but one our community has asked for. We're doing the best we can to implement it. It's been 3 days. So we're trying really hard to get things adjusted, but I appreciate the efforts. I mean, I know the team was out at Deep Run and changes were made and it improved dramatically. So anyway, thank you very much. I appreciate it. That's all from me.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Ogburn. Mrs. Shea.
Thank you so much. I just want to thank the whole team. The start of school is never without its own bumps and hiccups, but the smooth start to this year has really been tremendous. But definitely the smoothest start of my tenure on the board. But in all seriousness, thank you to the whole team. Ms. Bolton and your team, HR, y'all continue to do tremendous work, not only recruiting, but also interviewing and processing candidates as quickly as possible to get them in our school buildings. And we see that as, I know Ms. Coy updated that number multiple times as it ticked up to 98%. And so thank you to your team and y'all's tireless work. To our kind of with staffing, but tying into teaching and learning, this might be more anecdotal, but I feel like being a lot more proactive in adding sections this year where we had big classes. That's made a big difference in some of my schools. Instead of having to wait closer to the September 30th, being able to be proactive where we knew we had bigger sections and they were going to continue to bloom. I know that's hard for schools kind of the week or two before to have another section to fill. It's been really great for my schools to be able to plan for that before school started and have less shuffle once school started. So thank you for your team for that. And then transportation, just tremendous job, Mr. Pritchard. And I can't say enough, the apps, the Parent Square app to communicate, but also the bus app for parents. It's so helpful that even if you have a late bus, to be able to pull it up and say, okay, I see where it is, it's coming. As a parent, that's been really, really helpful. And then just the last thing, kind of to follow up with some of the other conversations and Ms. Atkins. So when we look at the immunizations particularly for all of our students, but particularly those 7th grade students, and is it 11th or 12th grade? 12th grade students. So that's very new to a lot of families. I know when I was a parent sitting in 6th grade orientation, last week, and they shared that about 7th grade immunizations, most of the parents who are pretty well read into a lot of things, they were all clueless, right? They were, is this new? And so as we look forward to the following school year, as we're always trying to work forward, how should they turn in those documentation of those immunizations as their child has their well checkup over the last year in order to prevent them from being one of the 1,300 students where the first day of school comes and there's no documentation?
Certainly connecting with their school nurses would be step one in getting those turned in. And I won't speak for Leslie, I will just note, so I shared the numbers of the amazing work of our team this fall, but they were also doing this last spring. So last spring, there were 900 immunizations that they administered. And so we do really perceive it as a year round with a particular emphasis this time of year. So there will certainly be ongoing communications and outreach to impacted families about those opportunities, and then getting that information squared away with school nurses so that they're not then on the list in August trying to scramble and figure out what they need to make sure their students can attend.
So is that something when they have their yearly checkup, should they just go ahead and print that immunization form and bring it into the school? Will they be ready to accept it at any point during the year?
Yes, they will accept it at any point during the year.
I know as a mom that if I don't get something done while it's happening, it often gets shuffled through. So being able to share with our families that, you know, it's an ongoing thing, the school's ready to accept it, check that off your list and don't think about it again. I think that's very helpful. So that's all, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Shea. So I guess I'll start off where Ms. Ogburn left off with weapon scanners. Have we done check-ins with our high schoolers just to see how they're feeling about the process? Mental health check-ins perhaps, because I know, having spent some time around my high schools this week, that some folks are a little anxious about it. So what are we doing to support our students there?
Yep, certainly school staff, administrators, teachers who might be familiar faces, welcoming students to the building, checking in with those students, and then later in the day, and certainly our high school counselors are also well attuned. Not just to the general anxieties, but to students who may have particular needs coming through, our special education students, making sure that everybody has space to ask questions, become comfortable, take the time to adjust.
Great, thank you so much. And I guess next, I have to ask the question about weapon scanners, just since I had lines. I mean, I heard Ms. Ogburn say, you know, they worked some things out at Deep Run, as we have at Glen Ellen. What do we anticipate for inclement weather? And then do we anticipate purchasing any additional scanners?
So Lenny may be able to provide more detailed updates, but the scanners we have on hand currently are for our high schools. Those were the priority. We are waiting on the rest of them that have been purchased but not yet arrived. So as those come in, as we're able to train staff at elementary and middle, we'll be able to phase those in throughout the course of the year.
That's right, and I think, you know, to your point about evaluating each building's situation, and Mr. Pritchard mentioned this, if there are particular needs in a building that an additional scanner may be needed to, you know, create more efficiency, you know, every layout and floor plan is different. I think you remember that from our field test reports. We were coming back frequently saying, you know, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Each campus is designed differently, what works well, and really it takes implementation to fine tune it. So we're certainly fine tuning whether it means additional scanners. Weather shouldn't be a factor. I mean, certainly kids are coming in off bus ramps out to in, but the process should be smooth that, you know, the scanning is happening once they've stepped inside the school doors. So certainly the first few days we saw those backups. We're not seeing that now, you know, but we continue to work to make sure our kids are safe.
Okay, but should the need arise, I mean, again, each building is different.
That's right.
But if we needed additional scanners at a building,
oh yeah,
in the
that's
division,
certainly part of what's being
be
factored
considered.
in. Oh,
Okay.
absolutely.
Great.
And they've already begun factoring that in, using the inventory we have, and then of course we have additional inventory coming.
Fantastic. And then I would just also like to piggyback on Ms. Atkins' highlight of traffic patterns. I'm very excited that some of our traffic patterns are going to be studied specifically on Staples Mill, where Glen Ellen High School is, people are picking up their students on Staples Mill Road. That's a 55-mile-an-hour road during normal time, 35 at dismissal. So if we could definitely look at that sooner versus later as safety. I mean, I don't want to ask for prioritization of a school. Let me rephrase on that. But that does concern me because I've gotten quite a lot of feedback this week from parents at the dismissal.
Yeah, and certainly off-school property and on neighborhood or surrounding roads, our administrators can't enforce the law, but we see cases where there are some challenges, and I know our administrators have put out some reminders to families about adhering to that for everyone's safety, but that's certainly when we can work with our partners in Henrico Police again, as well as our partners related to figuring out things related to timing of lights and road patterns and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I believe that's a VDOT road, but and again, just to piggyback off Ms. Atkins and praise communication, not only from the division, but from our schools. I mean, as a parent, I've been well informed about what's going on, and I'm really appreciative, not just as a board member, but as a parent of 3. So thank you for the clear, concise communication. Fewer words, but it's just so clear. And questions that we share with you or our principals, quite frankly, messaging has come out and it's been very responsive. Very grateful for that. Let me see, transportation. I would very much like to share some transportation feedback I received this week from various sections of bus drivers. They would like to thank the board and leadership for being responsive with our recent code of conduct changes toward behavior on buses. So I wanted everyone to be able to hear that at the same time. Positive feedback from our bus drivers on that. And then if I may just ask again to please let us work. Let us know if you need anything from the board to support the elimination of scheduled late buses. It's just a priority to have all of our students in school. And in some of our secondary schools, that first block is an advisory support block. Dr. Cashwell?
Yes, it's critical need. And while we're faring much better than in prior years, we still have a gap with getting the drivers we need in place to eliminate those double runs that are causing those later pickups. And certainly our school administrators are working with students and families who are affected by those late times, making sure, again, they're not marked tardy. If there's instruction missed, that we're making arrangements to make it up. But it's certainly not ideal, not what we're aiming for, and hope that we can eliminate those as soon as possible as we bring on new drivers.
Thank you so much. And then I would just like to do a shout out to the team, our operations team that worked across the division, but especially at some of the schools in my district that were completely out. Thank you so much for your responsiveness. And then next, it's more policy related. Again, I've already noted that the bus drivers appreciated the support. And then I've noticed as a parent, as I'm seeing things, and I'm very excited by this because I know that cell phones have become, we actually have a policy in our student code of conduct regarding such, but I'm excited to see direct messaging about how it will be used, or if at all, during the school day, and I'm particularly referencing the secondary schools, particularly high school. So I'm very pleased to say, to be able to say that, because I do think that's a barrier to instruction in some cases, and also is not really a positive impact on mental health for our students. And then nextly, if I could just ask Dr. Cashwell, as I'm a parent filling out my forms, I would like for us to consider other ways that we can reduce fees, further eliminate fees, perhaps even the parking spot fee. I'm confused by that one. So if we could perhaps take another look, I know the board does this on an annual basis, but if we could just look at fees again.
We'll never stop looking at those fees. I see Mr. Wack is nodding, but yeah, we'll certainly take note of the fee you've mentioned, but we do review those annually, and I've been really proud of the progress we've made in the support of the board in eliminating a significant number of fees, but we continue that work.
Thank you so much. I know it is a priority for us to eliminate fees, as many of them as possible. And then lastly, in looking at the syllabi, who creates those and who reviews those for each class? The teachers create them, but who reviews them? I've heard some feedback on this topic.
I think you're probably generally talking about secondary
Yes,
course syllabus.
yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Particularly middle school, high school.
and it could be at elementary, there's a guide that a teacher puts, a third grade course guide or something of that nature. Those would be teacher-created materials. It may be that grade chairs or department chairs are reviewing those, but certainly I could get some more information for you, and it's likely site-based.
I'd appreciate that, to be able to share back with some constituents I've heard from this week. And then that concludes questions from our back to school update. Thank you again to everyone. Students, staff, families, community support for tremendous back to school.
Echo that, and thank you to the board for your support of all efforts that have led us to be able to have such a positive start to the school year. We're going to, of course, look forward to bringing you a number of updates. This is sort of our kickoff meeting of all things back to school, and we'll keep you tuned in on our efforts along the way and progress. That concludes items from me for this meeting.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cashwell. The next item on our agenda, board members, is unfinished business. Is there any? Moving on, is there any new business today, board members? Any new business? Well, then the last item on our agenda for this afternoon's work session is the announcement of our meeting dates. The school board's next meeting actually will be at 6:30 this evening. It will be our monthly meeting. And then the next meeting after this evening will be our next work session, scheduled on Thursday, September the 14th, 2023 at 1 p.m. Please note this meeting time may be adjusted. This meeting is adjourned.